Oh, are we nasty today? We're
We are
nasty
always
every day.
nasty. We are always nasty. I'm a nasty woman because I'm never afraid to talk about sex with anyone and in any setting.
I'm a nasty woman because for as long as I can remember, I have always been regarded as a slut by other people. I'm Erin Brown,
I'm Nagar Fanuni.
and this is Nasty Women Radio, where today we're talking about sluts. Actually, when we were in Cabo brainstorming about the podcast for another event, we just wrote down sluts question mark. We
We
had been drinking.
we were there was some tequila involved.
Yeah.
Um, there was absolutely tequila involved, and we were sitting around at the pool and we were like, brainstorming all these topics that we wanted to discuss on Nasty Women Radio, and we were just getting really excited. And I don't know, one of us just yelled sluts,
Yeah.
and
Here we are.
the Google Doc literally says sluts question mark.
Perfect.
Are
So,
we sluts?
right.
What do we think about the word slut?
What is a
Are
slut?
we don't we're gonna flesh it out for you today.
We
So
have lots of questions about that one.
yeah.
But
So
first, we're going to discuss THINX, yes?
yes, so this has been in the news. So if you've listened to our previous podcast, particularly the one on periods, or the two on periods, I should say, periods part 1 and part 2, if you haven't listened to those, they are wonderful episodes and you should definitely go back and listen. But we do
Obviously.
talk, obviously, we do talk in those episodes about how we capture our menses. I really just like saying that.
We
I've got
do.
like any excuse to say capture my menses. Uh, and one of the main methods with which Erin and I both use are the THINX panties. And THINX has been in the news recently because their CEO has been under fire for some sexual harassment, I believe, is the technical term that they're using, and just some behavior that employees felt was very uncomfortable and inappropriate.
Yeah, so what I read from the official complaint is that she allegedly was grabbing one of her employees' breasts and without permission, obviously. But here's the thing. All of the stuff that I read, I was like, this sounds like Nagar and I's relationship. However, neither one of us are each other's boss. So that is a huge, important distinction. So she was grabbing the breasts of one of her employees, talking about how she was obsessed with them. She would Skype call into meetings naked in bed or from the toilet, and change in the office in front of everybody. And again, all of these things were like, that sounds like me and my girlfriends, which for a lot of people would be really inappropriate in their relationships. And those are consensual confines of my female relationships that are close. And not all of them. Some of my friends are more conservative or more modest, and those things do not happen because of their boundaries and my respect for them. And certainly in no way that this is with a boss. I can't imagine. I've had bosses treat me really, well, not just unfairly, but I've had bosses grab me and sexually harass me for sure. And it is a terrible position to be in because, one, in the moment, it was always under the influence of alcohol when I was working in like restaurants and bars. So in the moment, it's mostly about trying to make sure that I'm safe and I'm making the best decision in the moment for my safety and for the business, I guess, is the other thing I'm thinking. Like, how can I make this be over and everyone move on quickly, which is just like, haha, and move on. And also puts me in a terrible position in terms of like, when that is my bread and butter, and in all of those cases it was, I can't afford to complain about it, So whether it's a man or a woman or a cool chick that's, your startup boss or whatever, like that's not an okay position to be in.
No, and one of the employees who actually was filing one of these complaints said that Mickey Agrawal is the former CEO of THINX Panties, and or the THINX company altogether, I suppose, because they're coming out with lots of other things as well. But one of the ex-employees who filed this complaint said that that Agrawal practically forced her into showing her nipple piercing. And she said that, she really didn't want to, but the quote is, "I said yes because THINX was a culture of we're all women here. This is to be expected, but it didn't feel good at all." And so I think that this is a really interesting, this isn't just about sexual harassment and professional behavior. This is a very sticky situation because we're talking about women working for a company that is for women by women,
Right.
and they're feeling like this behavior isn't okay with me, but I have to be okay with it because we're all chicks. Like, this
Right.
is cool. Like, we're, it's fine. It's fine. And I think that could be easily overlooked. That
Yeah.
could be something that you would easily just be like, but it's fine. We're all women here and this is how we interact with each other. But again, like you said, that's fine on a peer-to-peer basis,
Yeah.
right?
And
But
with
in a
specific
professional,
peers. You know,
exactly.
we've talked online. Jen just did a thing, our friend Jen Sinclair, on Instagram about us sending nudes to one another. And we do. I would never send an unsolicited one, though.
No,
You
you
know,
always ask me. May I send you a boob picture? And I'm like, absolutely.
but like it's
Yeah.
important to me, especially to someone who I've never sent one to. But yeah, that's a lady equivalent of a dick pic.
Yeah,
I'm not doing that.
you don't just slide into the DMs with an
No.
unsolicited dick pic.
No,
Yeah.
and that's just
So,
in that's just respect. That's outside of like
yes.
I'm running a company and these are my employees. And it felt to me, of course, I don't know, but it felt to me like this seems like probably how she is with her friends, probably the kind of chick I'd be friends with. But then when you're in a situation where you're in power, that changes the dynamic of things quite a bit. Not just in terms of legality and how it makes the other person feel, but it made it feel icky that she was behaving that way to me. You know?
Yeah.
Because like
Well,
harassing
again,
your employee into showing you your nipple piercing, that's not the same as me trying to give you a hard time about it. We're not in the same playing field.
no. And in addition to that, a lot of the employees reported that working at the company felt like an abusive relationship, that there was a lot of pettiness, a lot of like name calling, and just being underpaid. And so there's a lot of that going on. And I think, again, this is all alleged, right? We don't like none of this has necessarily come to light. She did step down as CEO. So like that, certainly who we don't know because I'm not her PR rep, but she did step down as CEO. And what this does for me personally, this is just like a personal perspective, is it's disappointing in this day and age, in this time where we are really fighting hard to push forward with intersectionality, to push forward with feminism, and to fight for equality and for equality in the workplace as well as socially and politically. And there are a lot of people who would say that women are petty. Feminazi bullshit is the thing that a lot of people say that are, anti-feminism. Women are petty, women are catty. They can't even get along within their own communities. That was a
Right.
big criticism of the Women's March and the beginning of the year with, intersectionality and feminism, saying that like, oh, they're fighting over which causes are more important. They can't even get along. And so for me, a company this big and this visible, having this kind of fallout, it does for me emotionally kind of make me feel like, ooh, does this give the opposition, for lack of a better word, more fuel to the
Yeah.
fire?
I don't know. I had the sort of opposite response and just thinking like, fuck, do I have any employees? No. Like, am I acting in appropriate ways? And like you said, I asked for permission to send you pictures. So
Yes.
I am, but it was a reminder to me because I have only experienced sexual harassment as a woman from men in the workplace. And so this scenario is one I honestly hadn't thought about.
Right.
And it
But it's
wouldn't
still
make it feel
sexual
different.
harassment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So should we shop at THINX?
Well, Mickey Agrawal is I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, is refuting the claims. So we don't know,
Yeah.
So it's like if we don't, we don't really know. So I'm hesitant to make a judgment as to whether or not this is a company that, oh, do I want to give this company my money? Because again, like if we don't know the facts, we don't know, it's all alleged, then I don't want to be like, oh, I'm out when I don't really know
Right.
what's up. But at the same time, if there are multiple complaints being made, there's something going on. There's
Yeah.
something.
And
Maybe
there
we don't know
are.
yeah, we don't know the facts, but then I have to think about, okay, she stepped down as CEO. If in fact this was her behavior, I am not okay with that behavior, and that makes me uncomfortable, but she stepped down as CEO, and there are plenty of other people who are employed by this company, whose livelihood depends on the success of the company, and it's a good product.
Right.
So it is an interesting question.
Right. Well, and so I've been having this conversation with a lot of people recently, and it seems that it really just kind of depends on where the issue that the company is having lands on your list of problems. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like that you care about. Because
Exactly.
I don't fuck with Hobby Lobby. I
No.
sure don't.
And I don't shop at Walmart either.
Ugh. So, it's not. It sort of depends on how you feel about that particular issue. And,
Yes.
we're not obviously going to tell you what to do. I'm not interested in making it public. Like, let's ban this
No.
sort of stance about anything.
No, we love THINX panties.
I love THINX panties. I'm so disappointed, though.
Yeah.
So I'm not shopping with them. And I'm hoping to see if there's other brands that are comparable. Right now, I have my full panty set. I don't know how long it lasts, though.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mine's still pretty durable. I agree with what you're saying in terms of like you really have to decide where that falls on your list of priorities. Like, for example, I'm really passionate about the environment and I recycle, and like I will just randomly, if I see garbage on the floor outside at the beach every day, I'm just like picking it up. It's just part of my daily shit, but I don't compost. Yeah. I don't have the fucking wherewithal to compost. That's just not a thing I can do, So you do just have to kind of decide, like, how do you spend your money, how you spend your time, how you are standing up for your causes and your beliefs on a day-to-day basis, and whether or not that's something that you want to take a hard stand on, and that's a personal choice.
Yeah, all I gotta say is Target better not fuck up. Like, so far so good, Target, but like that's gonna be a really tough morality day for me if they step in it. I'm gonna be like, God damn it, what do I do with my life?
What do I do now? Well, and again, there's like a lot of, they're saying that, there's a lot of controversy with the owners of PayPal. And I'm like, fuck, but I have to use PayPal. Like, it's part of my business structure. It's the easiest thing for me. And if I go and start like trying to figure out other ways, all I'm doing is taking time away from the work that I need to be doing in the world.
Right.
And I don't have the energy or the wherewithal to do that. So you do kind of have to say, like, I can't show up for everything, because you can't.
Right.
You really just can't, because then you fatigue yourself and then you show up for nothing.
Right.
So there is that.
Oh, thanks.
All right.
Well, and we basically like begged them for a sponsorship on one of our first episodes, and now I'm like, well, thank goodness they didn't holler, because then we'd be in a real pickle, wouldn't we? Like, thanks.
We would.
Here's the PR statement.
Okay, so slut. So what's up, slut? Yeah, what's up? Okay, personally, I'm just going to go ahead and put this out there from the very beginning, and we can flesh it out if necessary, but I really like the term slut as a term of endearment with friends and loved ones and people with whom I can have that kind of relationship. Just as the same as we spoke about, with people with whom you can send nudes with permission, right? So like every time I walk into the gym, I'm like, and all my friends are there, I'm like, what's up, sluts? And like my husband and I say it to each other, and it's a term I use with my friends. I call my friends sluts. I'll be like, sup, bitch? Sup, just the same as I would be like, sup, chick. Like, that's just for me with people whom I know, with whom I have that level of comfort, and it's not a derogatory term. It's like, that's just part of my vernacular. But I understand, of course, that for some people that could be considered uncomfortable and they wouldn't enjoy that. And there are people who are offended by words. And again, it's not being used in a derogatory sense.
Right. Right. Well, and offended by words it really depends on your history with that word as well. So for me, it's not as fun a word, but it's not a word that I'm necessarily offended by, but it is something that I have been called since as long as I can remember. So elementary school on, I've been regarded a slut, even though my actual behavior around sex has always been more cautious. And of course that is subjective, but I was one of the last of my friends to lose my virginity, and I was really thoughtful about like who do, like, if I'm going to sleep with somebody, what are the boundaries? Like, what am I looking for, and what does that need to look like? And am I emotionally prepared to have casual sex or not? Like, I've always been really thoughtful about all of my choices, but the language around me from other people has always been slut, which I don't even know, based on like my relative, I what is the word I'm looking for?
Experience.
Yeah, but like I was, I was a virgin. I was sheltering myself.
Yeah.
So to already be a slut, I don't know. And it was the 90s. I was wearing baggy pants all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know what a slut is. But I guess the idea of a slut is that it's somebody who is sexually promiscuous or appears to be sexually promiscuous or appears sexual in any way and is female. We don't say this about other genders, right?
We don't. I don't think I've ever called you a slut, even, in a friendly sense. And I say that because I don't think that that's a way that we engage. No. But I also never use that word in a derogatory sense ever. Yeah. I never use it derogatory, like derogatorily. Right. I never use it in a derogatory sense. I really don't, because it's the same as nasty women, right? Like we decided like this is a term that was meant to be derogatory, and the entire feminist world rose up and said, fuck that bullshit. We're proud to be nasty. And we took it back. Right. So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, you want to call people sluts for being sexually promiscuous or even just being confident in their sexuality
or existing. I still don't know. What did I do? I was 12.
Yeah, you were 12. Exactly. For just existing, for being, for a lot of times, what happens a lot of times with younger women is if you garner any kind of male attention. Yeah. And someone is jealous of that or someone is judgmental of that. It doesn't even have to be anything that you're doing. And in most cases, it's not. Right. It's just showing up and existing as you are. And if you happen to garner any kind of male attention, then there are going to be people who, will say like, oh, she's a slut because they're jealous or because they're judgmental. And that's not about you, but that needs to change.
Right. Well, and as I was thinking about this conversation today, I had a thought that I'd never had before that is actually kind of fucked up. But I know that was a narrative about me because I heard about it all the time. And I often heard about it from boys who were trying to make advances at me. They'd heard I was a slut. And
so they thought they'd get in.
Yeah. And I wonder if that, of course, the person who's responsible for being aggressive is the aggressor, always, 100%.
Absolutely.
However, I wonder if that lent itself to more aggressive experiences for me, because they were boys who were coming with an expectation that it was going to be easy, who then couldn't go back to their friends and say it didn't happen for them. And so that's when I would hear about it, like this dismay that like I wasn't interested, and they're like, but that's what you do. And I'm like, you're gotten misinformation. Someone has lied to you.
And so the rhetoric around, Erin was that she was easy. Right. And so, and that could certainly like pertain to some behavior. But like you said, the behavior, the aggression is always on the aggressor. Right. It's not something that you're doing. It's not something that you ask for. It's not anything that you're wearing that causes you to be the victim of any kind of assault or aggression. So this happens a lot more than I think, especially with young girls. This happens a lot more than I think people are aware of.
Right. Well, and I wonder, like, how poorly was I set up from being, like, known as a slut from elementary school to have those sorts of interactions with boys? And then the way we teach them about that is that they should see how much they can get away with, and we should see, like, how long we can keep a coin between our knees or whatever the fuck that meant. But, yeah, that was, like, the ongoing dialogue between me and boys from 12 to, probably through high school was, like, okay, let's do this. I heard you would do this.
And how would you show up to that? What was your response?
It would depend. When it started, I was 13. That was a really rough year for me in terms of violence and a lot of things. But I was terrified. I didn't want to make anybody upset. I learned to be nice. So like how much do you put out and it is nice? before you're a whore or before I'm physically uncomfortable. And when I was in junior high, I did not want to have sex. I didn't have sex in junior high. A lot of people were doing that, and I just didn't feel not even ready, but I wasn't even like ready to really think about that yet. Like I was like real excited about like maybe making out, maybe.
Yeah.
If you had like really good hygiene and pretty lips. But that's it. Like everything else is kind of freaking me out. so I think mostly just kind of frozen, like, and then just like no, or but trying to like nicely tell someone to remove themselves from my person, or it certainly wasn't a really empowered no, get the fuck away from me, why are you talking to me like that, because I wanted to be liked, and it had never
Yep.
occurred to me that like I'd never had a discussion with anybody about boundaries, like I was just living that like girl narrative of be nice, and then here someone was like being aggressive with me in a way I wasn't comfortable with, and I had no tools. So
Yeah.
it just was messy and really fucking uncomfortable trying to nicely say to fuck off me.
Yeah. Well, I think that what it really comes down to are these constructs for women that start at a very young age. And we
Yeah.
talk about a lot of this stuff. We talk about these social constructs about promiscuity and niceness and submission and being quiet, being silent. These start at very young ages.
Mm-hmm.
And it is certainly something that is pervasive in our culture. So I do think that it is absolutely it's a cultural issue, and it's not something that just happens because you're not falling into that sort of slut shamed environment because you have sex with a lot of guys. That's not what it is. It's if you don't check off all the boxes of what society expects you to be as a perfectly submissive, quiet lady, there's going to be some
Right.
lashing out against it.
You can do all the things like you said, and then get like some attention, like people are interested in you, and then you're still a slut.
Yeah. So the bigger problem with this is that societally we think that we have some kind of right to judge how people show up in their bodies,
right,
and how they show up in their lives, and to call them derogatory names as a result of it. Which is why I actually really like that the term slut shaming has gotten has so many legs. It's really gotten a lot of legs. It's really like it's a common term that people use now, because the term itself basically says that to shame someone for being sexually promiscuous or sexually open or sexually forward, if that's the case, is unacceptable.
Right.
So it's almost like saying, like, you're not saying that it's bad to be a slut. You're saying it's bad to shame a slut. It's okay to be a slut.
Right.
It's okay.
Right.
It's totally okay.
Right.
Whatever that means for you.
Right. Except we still don't know what the fuck it means. Like, it's
don't know
like
what it
bitch.
means.
Like nobody knows.
We know what it means.
We just think, and I think I only see women doing this. I don't know if there's any other like oppressed group that operates with the same behavior. If they do, that's of course not my critique to give. But women are the only group, and white women specifically, I would say, that instead of educating their children about the oppression that they will either be a part of or experience as the victim of, they don't educate their children at all. Instead, we like try to educate our daughters on this like princess thing, dress the right way and act the right way and speak the right way and do all of these things, and then you won't be a slut, then you won't be abused, and you'll get the right guy, which will access you to the success and whatever. But we think that if we control our own behavior and we teach our kids the same thing, then we can avoid these things. Just don't be a slut, right? And then you won't have this problem.
And then you won't have that problem. Then you'll be fine. You'll be safe. You'll never be sexually harassed. You'll never be assaulted.
Right.
Just dress appropriately, whatever the fuck that means.
Right. Oh my gosh, there was this case in 2012 that the New York Times wrote about, this trigger fucking warning. I don't even use that word very often, so not fucking around. It is 2012, I think, and this girl who was 11 was gang raped by like 20 adult men.
Oh,
and there was an article about it in the New York Times that talked about how much makeup she was wearing and what clothes she was wearing and how adult she looked. An 11-year-old girl.
That shouldn't even be part of the rhetoric.
Right. And it's New York Times.
Should not.
Like, it's not like some little... We always want to think it's somewhere else. So, like, one of the biggest newspapers in our country wrote an article about what an 11-year-old wore the night that she was gang raped by 20 men. Like, that's some shit you have to look at.
You do. It's always part of the conversation. When we talk about assault, when we talk about sexual assault, when we talk about sexual trauma, sexual harassment, it's always what she was wearing, right, how she looked, how she showed up is always part of the conversation, if not the lead.
Right.
of the conversation.
Which we don't do with other crimes. You know, if somebody's mugged, we're not like, well, they were dressed fancy.
Right.
You know, throwing money around.
They were just,
yeah, because we assume that generally people aren't doing that. And generally, it's a fair assumption. Women aren't walking around asking for someone to sexually assault them. That's not a thing that's occurring, you know, regardless of what they're wearing. And the thing that I wish more men would speak to this, it drives me crazy that this is a woman's issue and not something that men address more readily. But what I think is so condemning to men about this whole idea is that if you see, first of all, that they just want to have all the sex with everybody all the time. That's the narrative about them. They have simple brains and they just want to put their penis wherever someone will allow them at all times.
Which is not...
It's not true.
Not true.
It's not true at all. So there's that. And then beyond that, they're so driven by their penis and nothing else that if they see skin or a sparkly top, you know,
right.
or whatever
but it's like, well...
then not only are they like distracted by it, but they won't be able to control themselves from becoming violent if they can't stick their penis there. Like, that's the narrative. And I'm surprised more men aren't offended by that.
No, and because that's not what we're talking about.
No.
We're talking about the woman's responsibility and the woman's role in it, and that it's, you know, well, she shouldn't have been wearing that. We are not talking about, well, but why are we assuming that this is how men behave? Why are we assuming that this is the norm? Because it's not. And actually, my husband John and I were just having this conversation recently. We were walking the dogs in our neighborhood, and there were two high school girls. They looked like they were in high school, and they were wearing backpacks, and they were like, oh my god, and like, oh my god, and like that, and they.
So you were ready to hang out.
Yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, was I like that in high school? Probably. And it was an interesting sort of social, not an experiment, but just like a social sort of like, you know, awareness of like watching this. And we were just kind of like, oh, you know, high school girls, and I wonder what what they're all into. Yeah. And one of the girls was wearing these little tiny booty shorts, like tiny shorts. And I mentioned to John, not as a judgment, but just as to open up a dialogue. I said, if we had a daughter and she wore shorts like that, how would that make you feel as a man, as, you know, as a father potentially? And we know we are parents, but we have a boy. Yeah. So it's a very different experience for us. And he said, you know, that's a difficult conversation for me because I want her to feel like she can show up in her skin however she wants to show up. And I don't want her to feel like she needs to dress a certain way because I don't want her to feel as though it's her fault if she's harassed. Right. You know, I don't want to put the responsibility on her. Like, she should be able to show up wearing shorts, and like that should be fine. And at the same time, I don't want to shelter her from that possibility that it's going to happen to her. She could get harassed on the street because I want her to be prepared. I want her to, like, you know, feel like I can. So it was just, we didn't come to a conclusion, but it was just an interesting conversation to have because it's like, if that were my daughter, because personally, me, if I walk to the gym, I live half a mile from the gym, and I'm wearing shorts, I always wrap a flannel around my waist because I know that I'm going to get harassed no matter what. And I'm just exhausted by it. Yeah. I'm exhausted by it. I hate that I like, and I think about like, am I standing in my power and in my fullness as a sexual being when I cover myself up because I know I'm going to get harassed? Is that taking my power away in some way? Or am I just fucking sick and tired? Right. Am I just like, you know, and what would I teach my daughter? Like, maybe I would just have that conversation.
Yeah, that's it. Because I mean, you know, I have a daughter. She can explain slut shaming because it's already a thing. It's a discussion that my husband and I have a lot because there's already this idea that like we should keep her covered, you know, and then people always go to the most extremes. You know, my kid is not running around in the yard naked because there's other reasons for her not to run around in the yard naked. Like, you know, there's places you don't want bugs to fly, right? So like, then there's rules about like how much clothes we have to wear. So that's right. There's laws. She's not breaking any laws. But if she should be able to wear little shorts, what kind of bathing suit she should be able to wear and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And the logic of that, if you keep asking yourself why, it always comes back to this idea that we can put them in a protective outfit. Yeah. You know, because the truth is, if she's a teenager and she wears little shorts and she finds that she is receiving more attention from cars and men that she doesn't like, then she might choose to wear something different. It's heartbreaking.
And that's her choice.
That's a discussion, but I hate it. Yeah, it's awful. But there isn't anything that I can. Then the thing is, because we know we're fucking grown up ladies, then you change your outfit and you get the same. You get the same deal.
You get it anyway.
There's no. There's no.
You get it anyway.
Fixing it, and so I never want her to feel like that onus is on her. 100% of the time, someone yelling out of the car is the one at fault for yelling out of the car.
Yeah.
I haven't worn shorts to run ever because my thighs, it would hurt. It would be a real.
They would chafe. Yeah. The chafing is a real issue.
Chafing is real.
Yeah.
Make that a bumper sticker. But have been. I don't run in town very often. Always ran in the trails with my dog because I was harassed all the time, and I was wearing like capris. And a shirt is also never comfortable going with like just a sports bra. So, I'm wearing like the most clothes, more clothes than is probably comfortable for the weather that I'm running in. And still and usually it's about anal.
It doesn't matter.
What is that?
Really?
Yeah, when I'm running, I guess I don't know.
Maybe you just have like you're like, talk to me about anal. Maybe you have a sign on your back that says, talk to me about anal.
That I don't know about.
I'm a nasty woman. Let's talk about anal. No, you're right. And I think that for me, when if I cover up by just putting, by cover up, I'm just covering my ass with a flannel because, but it's more for me because I'm just like, if it will reduce the instances of harassment by even 1%, I'm at the point where I am so sick and tired of being street harassed that I'm aggressive about it now. I used to be really chill about it. I used to just like put on headphones and ignore it. And now, just the other day, I know we talked about it recently, but it happened again the other day. I was walking to the gym and there were a bunch of guys in a car and they were yelling out the car. And I like legit just looked at them and said, fuck off. And I'm just at the point where I'm just like, I'm angry about it.
Yeah.
I don't want to take it anymore. And I want to fucking come back to you and tell you this is not okay. You cannot talk to me like this. I am a person existing in the world in my own experience, walking to the gym. You don't get to insert yourself on that experience because I'm a woman walking down the street.
Right.
All of a sudden now I'm deserving of your sexual advances.
Right.
That you're yelling out your car window. So, slut or not slut, I don't think it matters.
No, nobody wants to be yelled at out of a car.
Yeah.
Ew.
Yeah. Nobody wants that. And really and we're going to do it. I think we talked about doing a whole episode about street harassment because it is a very real issue. And the issue with that really in this sense is that it doesn't matter what you're wearing. And you could be walking down the street wearing anything, and immediately the onus is on you.
Right.
Immediately it is, it's typically male on female street harassment. It's more often done that way because there is this feeling of male privilege,
right? Of
power.
Or male on gender non-conforming persons. They also get a lot of sex.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But it's typically like coming from cisgender hetero men, and that has always been my experience. And it is very much like, this is me exerting my power,
right,
on other people because I can, because that is my right. And I think that's a huge issue in terms of slut shaming because it's like, no, you don't have the right to judge how I show up based on what I'm wearing, based on how much makeup I'm wearing, or the way that I look. Like, this is for me. This isn't for you.
No, and I think where people get confused about that is that, like I dress, not running necessarily, but in general, I dress in a way that is not necessarily avoiding attention. We'll just say that.
Right.
I like big sparkly things. I'm really into jumpsuits right now.
You're a rainbow.
I'm fancy. Can we segue real quick? I forgot to tell you my big fancy news.
Uh-oh.
I'm buying my grandmother's Cadillac.
What?
I know. It's a 2002 Cadillac DeVille. I already have a playlist full of songs about driving a Cadillac.
My God.
It's literally her church car, and she just doesn't need a car anymore. And so I'm getting like a crazy deal, and I'm going to be able to sell my car and make some money for our summer vacation. So.
I am so excited about this.
Gold with white leather interior. Why don't I already have this bougie-ass car?
Oh, my God. That's queen shit. That is queen shit right there. I want you to do a photo shoot with it.
I will. I have the playlist. I mean, I'm not kidding. It's gonna be a thing. watch the gram tomorrow.
I'm excited. I'm excited to come visit you in Kansas and just like roll deep with it.
Dude, it's so cozy too. White leather interior. Okay.
I mean, amazing. Okay.
Sorry, I just got really excited about being fancy. So
no, I'm excited
really
about
fancy.
that for you.
and people notice me when I go play. I have like, Elsa hair and bright red lips and whatever. And I'm not, I'm not hiding, and I'm not afraid of getting attention. That's fine. Somebody can walk up and compliment me. People can look at me. I'm not running around hiding from the world. But there's a completely different thing from people noticing you, or even making eye contact and complimenting you and yelling at you, or looking at your outfit and assuming things about how available you are for sex at the moment. Mm-hmm. Those are very different things, because people will look at me and be like, well, obviously what? What? Obviously, I'm very fancy and I like decorating myself, and I don't mind you noticing that. Beyond that, there's no obviously.
No.
Beyond that, you're a dick if you're inserting yourself in my life in a way that I've not asked you to. And it feels so aggressive. It feels like just...
It is. And I think that... I think that now, just like everything else that's sort of exacerbated as a result of social media, I am so glad to have grown up in a world without social media. I cannot tell you how grateful I am that in our generation, if you got bullied at school, you came home and that was it. It was over. You didn't have to deal with it anymore. Right. But slut shaming in, young girls and teenage girls in particular has become really a major issue with the rise of social media, because if a girl is considered a slut at school, she'll get bullied online, she'll get shamed online. And this is something that could ruin people's lives. Yeah. This is something that can really, drive people to a lot of pain, a lot of drastic measures, and a lot of feeling like this is the role in which I've been boxed in.
Yeah.
I've been boxed into this identity, and that's it. And I don't get to be who I really am in the world because I've been boxed into this idea that like I'm this person.
Yeah. Pre-social media. So my experience with that meant that in the last... since I turned 30. So in the last 4 years, and really trying to turn over, like, why am I still having PTSD symptoms from sexual assault? Like, I'm rolling my eyes, not because it's not important, but because I'm exhausted.
Because you're frustrated with it. Yeah, you're done. Yeah. Enough already.
I know it's not going to be, like, all better, but can I be some better? Like, I've done all this work of, like, I've literally had shamans shake things at me. Like, I have done everything I can think of. And so when there's more, it's just like, okay, what? And so I was investigating in my head these different scenarios where I felt ashamed, where I felt really gross in the moment, and realized that those were situations that were abuse, were grown men, and I was 13, a perspective I didn't have at the time. What's interesting to me about that is that because of this narrative that I was a slut, what I walked away from those moments feeling is he knew I was a slut, or that was really slutty, or I should be ashamed of this interaction that I in no way allowed for, that I didn't consent to. Usually I was pretending to be asleep. And believed that was because I was a slut, because that had always been something attached to me. I didn't realize that I was actually sexually conservative until I was in my 30s and looking back at those things, because the narrative handed me was always that I was a slut. So anything that I chose to do, I attached to sluttiness. Either from, in college, I would have probably been more like, yeah, I'm a slut. Fuck you and your ideas about everything. Owning it. But that had always been a part of my identity in a way that I hadn't really explored. So without even it being an online thing, without having 100 Instagram comments from peers at school, that's
follows you. It follows you.
In my 30s, I had to really go, oh geez, I'm not a slut. Still don't know what that means, but I wasn't ever promiscuous. I wasn't ever easy. That wasn't ever something that I actually participated in it anyway, but I was abused a lot of times, and I never explored that because of not only this narrative that I was a slut, but the way that slut shaming then turns into she was asking for it. Exactly. So I assumed that I had somehow asked for all of my experience that had made me feel gross, when really, like, a grown-ass man touching a 13-year-old girl who's pretending to be asleep does not a slut make, whatever the fuck that is, but a perp makes. That's a perp.
Yes.
But giving these, first of all, not talking to girls about this in an honest way at all is not okay. Not talking to kids in general about this in an honest way is not okay. But thinking that you can, fix that narrative by your own behavior. You know, if I had gotten the advice to just dress different or just whatever,
No.
you know, which I didn't
Yeah.
really get that preventative measure so much as the questions afterwards that you could have prevented it in this way.
But that's
Leads
what
to
we
that.
do. We tell girls to dress differently. We tell them to be, unassuming, and then it won't happen to you, or you won't be slut shamed, or you won't be harassed. And it's a much bigger issue than that. It is a culturally pervasive issue that I really think a lot of it stems from the fact that we still live in a puritanical culture
For women.
wherein for women
For women.
wherein sex is shameful.
Yeah.
It's shameful. We don't talk about it. We do it only, missionary with our partners, our married, partners.
Yeah.
And we don't talk about it. And it's not something that you can be open about. Or if a woman is sexually confident,
Right.
and she feels comfortable in her sexuality and she shows up in that power, we don't see her culturally as a powerful person, as a person with value. We see her as a threat
Mm-hmm.
on the one hand, or we see her as a slut.
Right.
We don't see her, like, if a man is comfortable and powerful in his sexuality and he shows up, we see him as a powerful person, someone to be respected.
Someone
We
who can
don't.
be president.
Yes.
Holy shit. Can you imagine? Let's
Talk
pretend.
about that.
Let's pretend for a moment that Donald Trump had consent to grab the pussies. Okay? So let's pretend that narrative was not about assault or not assault, just for simplification. And he's just talking about everywhere I go, ladies are really interested in me grabbing their pussies. I have all this consent and I'm grabbing the pussies. Okay? So let's give him that. Can you imagine Hillary Clinton saying something to that degree? And what would have I just go to the bars, I get consent, and I just grab as much cock as I possibly can. I just want to hold it in my hand.
Get the balls, just cup them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that would be acceptable. No,
Right.
People would be like, she's disgusting. She's a
That's
slut.
disgusting, right?
She's a predator. She's sexually aggressive.
Yeah.
No, but for Donald Trump, because he's a man. So this is we just simplified an
We're in
issue.
the locker
Obviously,
room right now. Can you imagine us even having that conversation? I just love grabbing the dicks.
I just love just cocks everywhere. No, not a thing you can do.
That was good.
So, yeah, obviously that's simplifying it. It's not that simple, but we do live in a culture where this is the construct, where it is okay for a man to show up sexually with very little recourse. Yeah. He's not going to be called a slut.
No.
That's not going to happen for him.
If he is, it's funny and a compliment. I realize yeah.
Yes, but if a woman exemplifies those same behaviors, so this is very deeply layered, right? There's this idea of like being slut shamed for just existing in the world.
Right.
And the fact that we put the onus on the woman for how she dresses and how she shows up, as opposed to the people who are slut shaming her or calling her a slut or being aggressive towards her in the first place.
Right.
But then there's this other layer of like a fear that if you are comfortable in your sexuality, that you're not allowed to show that.
Right.
And that's a problem.
That is a problem. I was watching some YouTube videos just to like get excited about talking about slut shaming, and
what YouTube videos do you watch that get you excited about talking about slut shaming? Share the link. Link them below.
I just went like slut shaming and saw what came up on YouTube, and I was particularly looking at ones made by men because I was curious. Most of them are made by men that are just explaining how it's not really a thing, but I guess there's like a common like alt-right dude. I know, it's really helpful. Thank you for explaining my experience to me. This one dude was talking about it being evolutionary slut shaming because men are like spreading their seed, and then women have like the onus is on women to deal with population control. So
cricket.
I was like, wait, what?
I will tell you, there are a lot more men that have that. Like, I've spoken a lot about sexual harassment, particularly street harassment, with a lot of my guy friends.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are really just like, yeah, it's natural for guys to want to do that because from an evolutionary standpoint, they want to spread their seed. They look at a woman and they think that's someone I could impregnate. And I'm like, I think we've advanced
Yeah, no.
past that. I don't think we can, I think we've evolved past that in so many ways.
And
That is not.
they're not actually trying to impregnate you. They're trying
No.
to give you a hard time.
No.
They don't turn around. And if they do, then it starts to feel dangerous. But like, that's not making a pass at someone even. That's not trying to meet someone. And you have to sort of meet someone in order to consensually impregnate them, right? So it's not an introduction even. That's just like a lame pass for being lewd.
Yes. And I think that it's that when we do that, when we say like, oh, well, it's evolutionary, what we're doing is we're giving permission to the behavior. We're not making it as heavy as it needs to be. And by doing that, the behavior doesn't change.
Right.
That's the greater issue, is that we're always making excuses for this behavior, and we're saying, well, that's just the way things are. And that's how things don't change.
Right.
That's how things stay the same when we say, well, that's just the way things are. Because let's just say, for the sake of argument, that's why it's happening.
Right.
That still makes it not okay.
Right. Well, and it's
still not
unsuccessful.
okay.
Super
Yeah.
unsuccessful.
It's very unsuccessful.
It seems like we would have, if it's literally evolution, we would have evolved out of it because it's
exactly, because it doesn't work.
Evolution doesn't select for that.
Exactly. It's not working. Okay.
No.
Like, we have to evolve now to, like, more successful strategies.
I mean, Tinder, we have really evolved, right? You can like swipe about it if you're trying to meet someone.
See? So, sorry, Mr. Evolution, your fucking excuse is bullshit.
There's an app for that.
There's an app for that. Exactly. So I think that, the issue here is that, like, yes, we know that slut shaming is a big issue. There's all these ideas around it. There's all these layers to it, right? Mm-hmm. So for those of you listening, what can we do? How can we show up for this? What's our role in this? How can we, for me personally, I decided from a very young age that I wasn't going to be someone who was offended by words. And I was going to take that and, like, I was going to take the power. As a writer, as somebody who believes that words have the power that we give them, I'm very particular. I don't use words in a cavalier manner by any means whatsoever. So when I call my friend, hey, what's up, slut? I'm doing that intentionally because I'm like, I love you and I see you as a sexual person and I love that for you and I want you to feel comfortable in your sexuality. That's, for me, that's like the subconscious thing that's going on. So how do we, that's kind of how, for me, that's my way, is taking it back. I'm taking the word back and I'm just saying, like, you can call me a slut all you want. I will take it as a compliment. So that's my personal way. And I think that this is something that we all need to discuss. Like, how can we be a part of changing this? That's one way that I do it. Another way is that I don't want to say never. I'm very conscious about how I speak about other women. Mm-hmm. And the space with which I give them to show up in their sexuality and in however they choose to show up. I'm very careful not to judge women for how they dress, for their makeup, for, modifying their bodies, for their sexual prowess, whatever the case may be. And I make it a point in conversations when that comes up with other women. If that does come up, I shut that shit down.
Same. But yeah, I just don't stand for it. And also for me, that means talking to our kids about this, like that there isn't any way to avoid this, that this is unacceptable behavior. This name calling is unacceptable. The ideas behind it are unacceptable. And if that's hard to wrap your mind around, and I find it is for a lot of people, just because this is such a pervasive part of the way our culture works, keep investigating. If you're having a hard time understanding, like, well, but you should dress in a particular way, or you shouldn't sleep with so many people or whatever. Just keep asking yourself why. Like, keep asking yourself why until you get to the bottom of that, because it's 100% of the time it's misogyny. There's some, like, hatred of women buried under what you're saying that you haven't considered because you've always thought you could fix it somehow. You just don't wear that top. You just don't put on that lipstick.
Yes. And what's really interesting is I've seen this come up a little bit in conversation wherein people say like, oh, I would never do that. I would never send nudes to my friend, or I would never wear a thong bikini, or, I would never, wear red lipstick, or, a low cut top. Not because I'm not a feminist, not because I'm opposed to it in any way, but because I was raised.
What does that mean?
I was raised.
I was raised with higher morals than you.
Yes. I was raised. It's a really interesting conversation, actually.
I'm not judging you. I'm just classier than you.
Yeah. I was in my home, propriety was an issue. And my response to that is like, okay, but propriety is not, it's not like there's not like a blanket, like, okay, this is propriety. Right. And this is what we've decided as a culture is appropriate. And right. This is what's moralistic. This is what, the thing is that there are a lot of women walking around thinking, oh, that's just what's appropriate. And I was taught that this is what's appropriate. And that's not internalized misogyny. And that's not, but it is.
It is.
And we have to stop saying that, like, well, that's just the way I was raised because I was raised to be appropriate. That's fine for you. Right. But like,
that's just a fucked up thing to say.
Exactly. But at the same time, understand that where those actual beliefs stem from. Right. It's not just that you were raised in a family that was modest. Where does modesty come from?
Right.
Where does that come from in the first place? So much of this comes from this puritanical system right. in which we live that was designed to shame women for their sexuality.
Right.
To shame bodies, that bodies were shameful. And I think that
women's
we're talking
bodies.
About women's bodies.
Yeah.
Particularly women's bodies. Like, I think if we're gonna throw evolution into the mix, then it needs to work both ways. Like, how have we not evolved away from this idea that bodies are shameful? So if this idea of modesty and purity and propriety, like, it's all fine and good, but ask yourself where that comes from. It's not just like, oh, well, this is what I was raised because this is what was okay in my household, and I'm going to perpetuate that. That was passed down for generations, and it's rooted in shame, and there is no denying that.
Yeah, and you can investigate that and think about where that comes from and still land in a place where you're like, but I personally am modest. Great.
I still don't want that. Good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Make empowered choices for your body, in your body, for you. That is amazing, and I love that, and I want that for you. What I don't is for us to make judgments about how other people choose to show up based on our value system.
Right. Or how they were raised. Like, don't well, I was just raised better than you. But I mean, I think like a more thoughtful way to say something that wouldn't upset me about that is like, I'm not sure how I feel about this because I was raised with very specific idea of how I'm supposed to feel about that. I mean, maybe that's what that person means. Like, I grew up in this household where this was really ingrained in me, so I haven't even investigated my own feelings about it. That feels different than I was raised differently than you.
Yeah.
So.
And then, when you prompt that and say, maybe you should investigate that, and the response is, oh no, I have. I still think I'm.
Then why are you talking about how you were raised?
Just not talking about it. I'm not talking about it. So I think that the catch-all here is that let's be really conscious in general.
Yeah.
Women, how we speak about other women, how we regard them, how we sexualize things that maybe aren't even sexual in the first place.
Right.
How we tell each other that, like, the way we dress is going to garner attention and that we should be conscious of that. Like, let's be a part of this solution as a collective and decide that when we hear someone, slut shame someone else or judge their appearance or, judge how they're showing up, that we are courageous enough to start a dialogue about that.
Right. And the truth is, in my experience anyway, if we're talking about a woman who actually is promiscuous, and of course that's subjective as well, but is having sex with a lot of people, it's usually either someone who's really comfortable in making choices that, work for them, and then, like, we should be studying. Not that we all want to have sex with a lot of people. I don't. But the fact that this is a person who, in spite of everything, is showing up in a way that she really wants to, or on the more extreme other side, is a person who has been subject to a lot of abuse. That is another common promiscuity comes a lot of times after abuse for someone. And in either scenario, why the fuck are you judging them? Of course, there's a whole host of reasons why somebody might choose to sleep with a lot of people, but those are
Yes.
two common ones, right? Neither of those, for me, deserve any judgment.
No.
Like, anytime we're judging other people, we need to be looking at ourselves. But in either of those scenarios, like, why don't you just, like, put your tongue back in your mouth, find something actually more interesting to bond with your friends over, because, like, bashing other people is, like, the lowest common denominator of bonding. And leave it alone.
It's like talking about the weather. Like, come on.
Yeah,
you got something better.
Could, like, really damage someone.
Yes. Well, and it perpetuates a behavior too, right? Perpetuates this behavior of judging women for their sexuality, whatever their choices may be. Because what it really comes down to is whether or not, like, someone is a slut, again, we don't know what that means. Whether or not someone is a slut by societal standards or by whoever's standards, whoever's deciding this, that's none of our fucking business.
Right.
How many people another woman chooses to have sex with, how she chooses to chooses.
How she chooses.
Didn't I just say that I'm really particular with words? How she chooses to show up in her body, to show up in her sexuality, to hold her sexuality is none of our fucking business.
Right. Well, and we're still talking about women this whole time. We don't dissect that about men at all.
No.
We're like, well, why did she let him do it? Why do all these girls let him get away with that? Why do, it's always in the heterosexual construct, it is always about what girls did wrong. Even if a man is sleeping with a different girl every day of the week, then it's what's wrong with these girls?
About why is he having so much sex? That's not a conversation we're having. So no. I think what it really comes down to is that we really need to dissect our dialogue. We need to really dissect our dialogue, investigate our thoughts and our values on these subjects, and be responsible for our own part, because that's the first thing that we need to do is really be responsible for, like, how are we showing up about this? What are the conversations that we're having or not having? And really just show up in a way that is in our integrity. In this thought process that my body is my business and your body is your business, and I want you to feel empowered in your body because I want to feel empowered in my body.
Right. So anything outside of those confines, which is any judgment you're making about anyone else or any comment that you want to make about anybody else, is worth investigating. And of course, you individual listener person did not create this whole system, but it does require, I am going to hold you personally accountable if I hear you speaking for your own process of exploration. That means asking yourself why, so you get to the end of it, and choose maybe to show up differently than you were taught to. Everything we were taught about girls and sexuality, about sexuality in general, but particularly girls and victimhood, is fucked up. And so to figure out all of the ways those show up, even in our daily interaction, requires some work, some intentional thought around the way that you are showing up around this. And we're doing it. We expect you to join in.
We'd love for you to join in.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us today for Nasty Women Radio. Be sure to subscribe, to share, to rate, and review. Erin and I are currently... this is currently a labor of love between the two of us nasty women, and we would love if you would be a part of the growth of this show by sharing, subscribing, rating, and reviewing. And if this is your first time listening to Nasty Women Radio, welcome, and please go back and listen to our older episodes, particularly anal sex. I'm not biased at all. I love it. It's my favorite one that we've ever recorded.
See you next time.